Good afternoon. I wanted to welcome you this afternoon for our podcast for Talking Water in September of 2022. The topic is going to be emergency preparedness. And we want to thank our customers for joining us today for this informational session. The format that we use for these events is a brief presentation followed by a Q&A session. And we do have a number of subject matter experts that we will have available to answer your questions, and we will answer any questions that you have. We don't limit you to these topics. As a reminder, we are a government agency and we operate in a harassment-free and non-discriminatory manner. So we ask that you keep your comments respectful and mindful of other participants. We also have some controls here in the Microsoft Teams event to make you aware of. Under reactions, that's where your little emoji thing will come up, and that's how you'll raise your hand, and then we will call on you to answer any questions. And just to provide accessibility to our guests, there is a captioning feature, so it's really helpful if we can avoid or minimize talking over each other. So we will call on you when it's your turn to speak, and then we ask that you keep your microphones muted. We can mute you and we will do that. And if we have to do that, I think it gives you a little message that says we're doing that. So, please stay muted if we've muted you, because we want to keep you in the group, but we need to make sure that everybody can hear. And with that, I'm going to turn it over here to our subject matter experts and hosts. Joining us today for the content presentation is going to be Dave Kraska. And Dave is the program director for the Willamette water supply. And as part of his duties there, he oversees all of the partnership work with our agency partners that are helping with that generational investment in additional water supply. He joined us in 2015. Prior to that, he spent 26 years working as a consulting engineer for various drinking water utilities throughout the Western United States. So we're really lucky to have Dave. He's really the expert on the resilient system that we're constructing for our water supply in 2026. Also joining us today, we have Kevin Sutherland. He's been TVWD's emergency program coordinator since October of 2021. Before joining the TVWD team, he spent 20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, and after retiring from the military, he joined the Washington County Sheriff's Office as a patrol deputy and a school resource officer and a member of the hostage negotiations team. So he's going to bring a lot of excitement to the presentation today. It was at a school, when he was serving as a school resource officer, that he developed a passion for emergency management and security. And as that applies to readiness, response, and recovery. So he's going to be giving his tips on how you can help prepare on your side of it. And Kevin's a native of Portland, Oregon. He's the father of 3 children, and he keeps busy with his 2 dogs, Nikki and Nala. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for this discussion on these important topics. I need to take control of the presentation, don't I? All right, here we go. I think I've got control of it now, so let's get into it. Here we go. All right. So as Andrea introduced the topic here today, we're talking about emergency preparedness. And in the realm of water supply, which is TVWD's business, service interruptions can at times be an emergency when they're unplanned for. And examples are shown on this slide here, things like water main breaks, or sometimes even planned outages for maintenance, repair, or replacement can cause service interruptions. Certainly fire events can impact service. And other major disasters that we've all experienced here in the Portland area, in the Pacific Northwest, whether wind, ice, drought, heat, extended power outages, contamination, or even earthquakes. All of those we are subject to and can create emergencies that lead to service interruptions for our system. So how is TVWD preparing for this? So I've got some kind of outside TVWD information to share with you here today in terms of what TVWD is doing for its major water supplies. Kevin, a little bit later on, is going to be talking a little bit more closer to home for TVWD and what can customers do for emergency preparedness. But in terms of how are we preparing, certainly there's mitigation, collaborations and partnerships, planning, training, and exercises. And these are all things that TVWD is doing to prepare for emergencies. I'd like to talk, oh boy, what the heck happened? I don't know if you all are seeing what I'm seeing, but I clicked on something to continue the presentation, and my screen turned into something that does not look familiar to me. Did somebody else take over the presentation, Andrea?
I tried to take it back to solve this. I thought maybe if we trade it off, we could get it again, but here, just give me a second. I think I did this when I was muting a customer.
Okay.
So I
I will
apologize.
stand by.
See if we can get it back and then you could take over.
Okay, I'm going to try to take control here again.
Okay, sorry about that. That was my
No
fault.
sweat. We'll work through it. All right, there's slide 1, slide 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, all right, I think we're back on track now. Okay, so as I mentioned before, various things TVWD is doing to prepare for emergencies. One I'd like to talk to is about partnerships. When we talk about partnerships, how are we collaborating with other utilities in the region? A really good example of that is the Willamette Water Supply Program. It's essentially my job, as Andrea presented to you. It's my job at Tualatin Valley Water District is to run the Willamette Water Supply Program. We have a mission that guides everything we do. I'll just read it out loud for us here today. It's to provide a cost-effective, reliable, and resilient water supply system by July 2026 that benefits current and future generations of the communities we serve and supports a vibrant local economy. So from the beginning of the program that started back in 2015, this has guided everything that we do. We are on track. We are on track for a on-time completion by July 2026. And as shown here in the bottom of the slide, here are the partners. It's us, along with the cities of Hillsborough and Beaverton. So what is the Willamette Water Supply System that the program is implementing? It looks like this, beginning to the south in Wilsonville with our intake on the Willamette River. Then we have our pipeline that extends from there to a water treatment plant, state-of-the-art water treatment plant that we're constructing in Sherwood. More pipelines continuing north up to water storage tanks that we are constructing at the top of Cooper Mountain. And all told, the transmission lines that we are constructing right now is more than 30 miles of that large diameter, meaning on the order of 66 inches in diameter. And seismic. Okay, so now it's echoing. So I think somebody opened their mic, and if we could, there we go. I think we got it cleared up. All right, so now continuing on, seismic resilience is integral to everything that we're doing for the Willamette Water Supply System design. And it's the right thing to do, making this large of an investment, this large of an expenditure of public monies, to just get it right, to do it right so that we know that we can count on it when we really need it. And that means a seismically resilient design. So I've got a couple of examples to show you today. A quick one on our raw water facilities, then also some structural design features that we're implementing and pipeline design features. Now, when we talk about raw water facilities, that means our intake on the Willamette River. And as I mentioned, that's down in Wilsonville, and it's at the existing Willamette River Water Treatment Plant that TVWD was a partner with when Wilsonville implemented that back in 2002. What we did is with the two photos shown here to you, the one on the left shows jet grouting, the one on the right deep soil mixing. Those are two technologies that we implemented to strengthen the soils at the Willamette River bank to make sure that they don't move towards the Willamette River during a major earthquake, so that we can count on our intake on the Willamette River and our raw water pump station there. It's a highly critical element of our overall system so that we can get water into the system and treat it in Sherwood and then distribute it to our customers following a major earthquake, as well as just all the time once it's in operation. Additionally, as I mentioned, we're also constructing gravity storage at the top of Cooper Mountain. The photo here is shown of two 20 million gallon concrete storage tanks, and these are the Fern Hill tanks that are part of the Joint Water Commission system that's in Forest Grove, or just outside of Forest Grove over there. Our tanks will be similar to these. They will be concrete storage tanks, but a little bit smaller, 15 million gallons in capacity. And initially, we will only be building one of those two tanks. As part of the design of those tanks are seismic cables. And so this shows the construction of a similar type of tank. And so these seismic cables anchor the walls and anchor the whole tank down to the foundation so that during the shaking of a major earthquake, the structure remains solid. It is able to contain the water within it so that it's available for emergencies immediately following a situation such as a seismic event. And then finally, the last example that I have for you today about some of our design of our system to make sure that it's resilient is we also do a lot of engineering with our pipelines to make sure they're compatible with the soils around them. Since our water transmission main spans, as I mentioned, more than 30 miles around Washington County, there's a lot of different soil conditions that we come across. Some of that is very movable soils in an earthquake, such as around the Tualatin River. And so we design our pipeline to be able to move with the soil in such an event and still remain continuous. It remains in such a fashion that it can still hold pressure and still can convey water. It's really the most resilient and most cost-effective way to construct such infrastructure so that we can count on it following a major earthquake. So that concludes my part of the presentation here for you today. I'll pass it now over to Kevin to continue on with the rest of TVWD and what folks can do to prepare for emergencies. So Kevin,
okay. All right,
there you go.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and Andrea. All right, so today as we talk a little bit about individual and collective readiness and mitigation planning, talking about the system design for resilience, I'm going to talk about a couple themes. One of them is situational awareness, life safety, and option-based decision making. So I'll kind of touch back on those different things as we go through these slides, and then we'll talk a little bit about the physics of things or physical structures, and then the psychology of things or operational readiness, kind of what are you going to do, how are you going to do it. As we move through these things, I want to make sure that everyone has a clear picture of all of the great partnerships that we have and working with to support our customers with the Joint Water Commission and getting water from Scoggins Dam, Portland Water Bureau, and getting water from Bull Run Reservoir and Powell Butte, the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, and you can get some information from them, and regionalh2o.org. In addition, we work with local police, fire, Tualatin Hills Parks and Recs, and others as we really work on the stewardship of water, and as we're working to support you in how you can be ready in the event that we have one of those natural hazards or man-made interruption that David had talked about previously. So I briefly described the regional interconnectivity. It goes deeper than that with other partners as we work on doing water distribution to get water to you. But this just shows you that we have developed some capabilities with having the ability to distribute water with an emergency water distribution trailer. We do disaster drills, training, and exercises, as David pointed out, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get further through the presentation today. So an example, and David had mentioned mitigation. Tualatin Valley Water District, along with Washington County and a lot of other community key stakeholders, are working on our natural hazard mitigation plan. And that plan maps out all of those natural hazards that David talked about. And then it comes up with some strategies on how Tualatin Valley Water District, our community partners, the city and county will work to strengthen our system to lessen the damage that's caused by that natural hazard or potentially a man-made event. David described the Willamette Water Project, which is a huge mitigation effort. And so we're going through and looking at all of those things to be able to lessen it. And this gives us the ability as the stewards of Tualatin Valley Water District to go and ask for grant money from the federal government so we can do some of that physical hardening and mitigation things around the district. And the benefit to you is then we make our water supply more resilient and hopefully able to deliver water every day. Another thing that we're working on with our community partners, we're working on kind of how we're going to get fuel and be able to continue to deliver water to all of these partners that you can see here on the screen. So certainly we want to be able to provide water for firefighting. We want to be able to provide water to you. We want to be able to provide water to PGE and those others. And we're working with them. So we're kind of just partnering to make sure that all of us can get through those natural hazards as we need to. And how does that tie in with you? Well, at the same level, you at the individual level with the household and your community preparing. So I think as you really think about this, you can pick many programs that are out there. I've listed 3 here for you. The state of Oregon talks about 2 weeks ready. FEMA, or the Federal Emergency Management, has ready.gov, and the American Red Cross has resources that you can use as you're deciding which type of plan do you want, what kind of checklists do you want to use as you're doing your emergency preparedness. And we had talked a little bit about the key to readiness being situational awareness, life safety, and option-based decision-making. This kind of ties into you're starting to make your plan, you're physically gathering things, and you're preparing for what you're, here we go. Andrea, oh, there we go. Sorry about that. So why do we prepare? This really goes into the heart of the matter is you want to be prepared for those natural and man-made events that could impact you, and having that plan, talking about the plan, having the equipment, testing the equipment, and doing those things really should give you peace of mind that you know kind of what to do, and you're able then to start functioning rather than thinking, gee, what am I going to do? And I think many of us drive. So this, I guess the analogy is you've got a plan for when that light goes from green to yellow to red, and it's not going to be a surprise to you if something happens, that you've got that plan made for yourself and your family. So David talked a little bit about this, of how we could have interruptions to our service. This kind of reiterates that. And as you talk about readiness and emergencies, all emergencies start locally and finish locally, no matter how large they get. So this could be a small water outage where you're out of water for a couple hours, or it could be a water outage where you're out for a couple weeks. So rule of thumb is prepare for the worst and expect the best. And if you prepare for the worst, then you're going to be ready, and small interruptions will be a little bit of a nuisance, but you'll be able to move through everything. And I think the key to remember is shelter, food, and water. This is an example from ready.gov that shows you that they have different checklists and different things out there. This ties back into situational awareness, is how are you going to gather information if something happens. So you want to be able to stay informed, and you want to be able to sign up for local alerts. I think Andrea was going to drop into the chat link of how you can sign up for a local alert. Certainly, if you visit Tualatin Valley Water District's website, we have emergency preparedness information in there. Frank and some others have done some great videos along with the RDPO that provides information for you on emergency preparedness, how to work with water, and a lot more in-depth information than we're going to cover in the presentation today. So you do need to sign up for local alerts, have a radio, have other ways of gathering information in case the internet goes down or you're having issues with that. Develop your calling list, and if you have small children, others that rely on you, you need to have all of those numbers gathered together. And it's good to have a point of contact outside of the region that you can reach out to and let them know you're okay. In case local communications are difficult or you can't get through, you have that third party that everyone can kind of check in with and make sure that everyone is okay. So as you're building your kit, again, there are checklists in each of those 3 resources that I mentioned to you that will tell you how to build out that specific kit. And you want to use this as kind of planning, and that points out the most important things: shelter, water, and food. So you need to, again, be ready to take care of yourself for that extended period. 2 weeks ready is what the state recommends. As you're gathering your water, how much water do you need? This will give you kind of the planning number that you want to do, 1 gallon per day for each member of your family, special needs, and pets. And as you're gathering your food and everything, you want to make sure that you also have a 2 weeks supply of food for your pets. I think that the best advice as to how to treat water and deal with water is you want to do your research ahead of time, have a plan for that, and then make sure that you follow the notices that are going to come out from your water providers. And that will be either a boil or a no use notice. There are certainly different containers that you can get. You can buy bottled water, or you can store larger bulk water and have these containers on hand. Our website at Tualatin Valley Water District does have a video on there of how you can clean these containers before you would store water in them. It's got methodology of how you want to label the water and how often you want to be able to rotate that water out. Rough rule of thumb is every 6 months, but again, realize that you're going to have to store this around in different places that are kind of, you want to make sure that they're resilient storage areas out of the direct weather and not going to have things falling on them. Emergency sources of water. You want to be able to find what kind of water tank you have. It should be kind of already, everyone should know whether you have tankless or you have a tank, and then how you can draw water out of that in an emergency. Certainly that would be, you would want to use your stored water first, and only if you don't have stored water do you want to go to the other sources for your water. Other things that you can use to replace water, again, the note on here is make sure that this is not contaminated before you can drink it or eat it. Another source is being able to collect water from outside of the home. Again, you want to store your water or get it from a provider, but you certainly can go and use these sources that are outside, and you want to just make sure that you have a plan of how you're going to deal with that water, whether that water gets boiled, filtered, or how you're going to use it. And I think the best resources for doing that is on like REI or other camping stores that have the special equipment that you can get that, you know, most commonly are used by backpackers and others that go out and want to be able to filter water. You certainly want to do your research ahead of time on this. Get the product, try it, use it. You want to exercise your plan and make sure that you know what the water filter does, the fact that it's rated, it works, and you'll want to try it before you rely on it as your sole source in an emergency. Some water that you don't want to drink. Again, I think it's important to know the pros and cons. So you don't want to drink water that's going to make you ill. You want to go through your house and look and see where your water shutoffs are. And it's a good idea that you find those water shutoffs. Yeah, you find at the hardware store, get a tool that you can use to shut the water off. You want to find them, the shutoffs. You want to mark them and map them. And you want to be able to have that available in case you're away from home. If you have a house guest or someone that they can find the shutoff if you're calling and tell them to shut off the water. And you certainly want to practice that and make sure that you check it and that what you actually did works. As you go to one of those 3 sites and you make your plan, you want to make your plan as simple as you can, make things as readily accessible as possible. And you want to make sure if you have small children or others that you're caring for that have special needs, that they know what the plan is. They know if they can't stay in the house where they're going to meet you. And the example here is a nearby stop sign or neighbor's house. So you just work through that, decide what your plan is, and then rehearse it. I think that we have a great resource, which is our annual calendar, emergency preparedness calendar, and it's got different events per month. So you can break your planning down into a year and certainly move through that to prepare. Make sure that if you're getting battery powered things, you want to try and get devices that use the same size batteries, and that you rotate the batteries and that you have a supply of batteries to go with that. You want to think about what you're going to do if something happens in an emergency and you're stranded at work and it's not safe to navigate to get home, and then what those folks at home are going to do as you do that. As you're developing your kit for your house, you want to make everything readily accessible and something that you could potentially carry with you. This lists some of the key information that you may want to store outside of your house, the personal information, and you want to have also a small cache of money in case you can't use debit cards or the bank or something like that, and you have cash to buy things. You certainly want to have a kit in case you get stranded in your car in inclement weather or during a natural disaster. And as we're talking about planning, training, readiness, response, recovery, and everything, have the opportunity this October at 10:20 to participate in the Great Shakeout. We're doing that as a readiness thing, and it's good to review what you would do in an earthquake, whether you're at home, you're at work, you're traveling, kind of develop that situational awareness, be prepared for your life safety, and then have options of what you're going to do when something happens. So that takes me through how you would prepare at home, starting by thinking about how you're going to remain situationally aware and have some kind of options and a plan, some resources to gather information, and then some examples of how to do that.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Dave, for your great presentation. It's going to be your turn now, so we're going to open it up to questions. As a reminder, you have some reactions up at the top. If you click on that, you'll have a hand raising feature, or you can type your question into the chat. And we have one of our communication staff with us, Justin Dyke. He's going to moderate the Q&A for us. So see if you can stump the experts here. We'll take questions on any topic. We know we can answer the emergency preparedness ones, but if you have other questions, we have other experts on the call that will attempt to get you what you want to know. Here you go, Justin.
Thanks, Andrea. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat or the Q&A section yet, but I do see a hand raised from Dean. So Dean, why don't you go ahead and unmute and you can ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, my question is, when it comes to turning your water off after the emergency, I guess my question is, if the water line is not compromised somehow, wouldn't we want to maybe fill our bathtub or use that water rather than turn it off? When do we know when we should turn it off or not?
Kevin, you want to jump in with an answer there to help out Dean?
No, I think that, Dean, that's right. If you have water that's flowing and you're not seeing something broken right there in your local area, there's really not that need unless a message comes out that you need to shut it off. But we would shut it off at areas further away from your home. This is if there's something broken and you have to, for some reason, turn the water off for your house. For example, I had to shut my water off at my house when I had a guest and they broke the valve underneath my kitchen sink and water was shooting out there. So that was a local emergency that I had, and I had to go out in my garage and shut the water off. And it was kind of problematic because it took me a minute, because it was 2 o'clock in the morning, to remember that my shutoff valve, when they built the house, they put a built-in cabinet over the top of the shutoff valve, and there's a cutout in there. So it took me an extra 3 or 4 minutes to figure out and realize that I needed to shut it off. So that would be the example where you would want to shut it off either in your garage or curbside if you're having water rupturing in your house, and it may not be due to something larger. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, my concern was that I don't want to shut things off, gas or otherwise, unless I really feel I need to, because I may have need of that in an earthquake situation, for example. So that is my question is, at what point do we decide that? And I guess it's if it's obviously spewing out somewhere or you're seeing nasty stuff come out with it, then obviously you shut it off. But if it isn't, I would think you'd want to have access to it. So that was why I asked. Thank you.
Correct. You're welcome.
Thanks, Dean. And we'll go now to Bob, who also has a hand raised, and then we'll jump over to the chat in just a moment. So Bob, why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, so you'd mentioned earlier, so we have water storage in emergency for people, but you'd mentioned rotating it about every 6 months. Why do we need to do it that often, or why do you need to do it at all if it's in a, an approved container?
That's a great question. Actually, let's jump over to Joel Carey, our Water Resources Manager, to talk about this. And Joel, will keep you on the line for the chat question as well.
Sounds good. Thanks, Justin. Hi, Bob. Yeah, so generally speaking, the real reason you want to do that is just because of microbiological issues. You know, the recommendations we make are tied to making sure the vessels are clean, making sure the filling apparatus you use are clean. But eventually, water does have a shelf life, so it's a general recommendation, 6 months to a year. Turn it over, and then just on top of that, just the aesthetics of it. Any type of container you use could potentially lead to some aesthetic issues. You know, it might not necessarily be harmful, but just taste and odor as you use that during an emergency would be good to turn over for to prevent some of that taste and odor.
Okay, thanks. I suspected it was a taste issue, which means it's not a threat, but it sounds like maybe it's a little more if it's been there for a while. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just a good reminder. There's like Kevin mentioned it. We've got some guidance on there, so we always just try and tell folks if you're good about cleaning stuff up front, generally speaking, it can last quite a while.
Thanks, Bob. And Joel, on a similar note, we've got a question from Faith, who writes in, is there a way to store treated, or pardon me, is there a way to treat stored water to make it last longer? Sealed bottled water should last how long?
So I can't speak to sealed bottled water necessarily. I mean, as long as you're storing it out from sunlight, you know, if there's an expiration date, we generally say go by that. As far as storing treated tap water, you know, our recommendations and the general consensus, as Kevin mentioned, 6 months to a year turnover. I'll be candid, we've done internal testing. It can last longer than that if you've done a really good job of cleaning your vessels, the hoses you fill with, the faucets. But those are all the variables that, you know, that we don't control. Sometimes it's hard to control those in general. So that's why we come up with a recommendation saying 6 months to a year, turn it over, and you should be good to go. And that's again using our treated tap water. So additional steps. I don't see the question in front of me, so if I think I heard it correctly, any additional steps, you know, a little bit of extra bleach is never a bad thing. Even that, if you're doing a good job of disinfecting your vessels and everything else, even that's probably going a step beyond what we would need to do with treated tap water. As long as, again, store it in a cool place, out of the sun, things that you want to limit exposure to for heat. Anything like that will prolong the shelf life of that, just like any other food-based product. And the container you use as well, make sure it's certified food grade if you can. So spent or used milk jugs are not something that we recommend as a good example.
Thanks, Joel. All right, we've got another question in the chat. I will start the answer for this one, and I'll encourage Kevin to jump in with any additional information. Question is, how will TVWD communicate with customers about boil orders, safety, etc.? Twitter, radio, news. If electricity is down, what's the plan? I'll start this one off just because I do work in this field quite a bit. Often with our customers, if there's any disturbance to the water system, we do post that information on our website, depending on the size and the scale of any type of service disruption that involves a boil notice or any other things like that. And typically for smaller, more localized emergency response activities, that is, you know, emails, automated phone calls. We can hang door hangers for small enough events to make sure that folks are communicated with in a variety of ways to help avoid any customers who might not have one or the other type of communication. Now, after a large scale event like an earthquake or something of a larger nature, we would be then probably relying on more mass media, radio, news programs. Again, our website would be able to be up and accessed via smartphones if folks have enough battery power. So there are a lot of other ways to try and get that communication out. It will all depend on the size and severity of any emergency response activity. Kevin, is there anything else there I missed on that one?
No, I think that, go ahead, Frank, sorry.
I would like to add one thing to that. So hello, everyone. My name is Frank Reed, and I'm our communications coordinator. And Justin was dead on. I work very closely with him and Andrea both. So we want to make sure that we have your correct email and phone numbers on file. So in case we do need to reach you in emergency, it's very important that we have the correct contact information. So the best way to do that is we have a new online customer service portal. I will put the link to that in the chat, but make sure that we have your contact information so we can reach you in an emergency.
And we also work very closely with our local emergency managers from the city, county, other agencies. We meet monthly with them, have conversations and talk about these kind of things. So as Andrea and her team communicate out, we also communicate with the city, the county, the state, and the state of Oregon and Washington County have purchased a application called Everbridge, and they have the ability to send messages out. They can do that through geographical areas where they can make a polygon or just draw a circle around an area. And they can also through the city, county, and FEMA, they have the ability with, I think it's called iPass, they have the ability to push messages out to cell phones in a geographic area based on the cell phone pinging on the tower, and you don't necessarily have to be signed up for something, but it takes a large emergency for them to be able to push information out that way.
And I'll just round out one point in the question that didn't get addressed, and that's what are we going to do if we don't have electricity? And we do have a number of backup power options, but we also are connected as a local community, a region, and a state. And sometimes what you end up having to do is hand over some of your communication functions to a joint information center outside of the region so that they can push messaging back in. We do drill and exercises of these functions. We also have all been trained in FEMA communications. So there's a number of options that may have to be deployed in a large scale emergency, but we do spend a good deal of time practicing and educating ourselves on ways to do that. So there are mobile joint information centers that can be set up, and we would be deployed into one of those if we were unable to resource the information function here at our headquarters offices. But we're pretty well equipped. We have generators, we have fuel available. But in the large scale emergencies, that stuff does get metered out, and we don't necessarily get to control those kind of assets. In a large scale, they will prioritize. And I think that's come up in these emergency prep sessions before, to keep in mind that we do need your contact information. I think we're really fair. We aren't abusive with that. We don't spam you every day or anything. But we do need to reach you in an emergency, and that can be critical in terms of you finding out sooner. So in these boil water situations, it depends on the size of the area affected. If it was the whole district, we'd have to rely on mass media. But if they're small, isolated events, we may send people out to knock on your door or put something, a door hanger. But to the degree that we have digital information for you, that's a much better way for us to know that you got the message through email or a phone call.
Thanks, Andrea. And we've got another chat question. Again, this will be for Joel Carey from our customer Faith, who says, I have a small device that I use to test my tap water for contaminants. Can I use that to see if my water is still safe in an emergency?
Hi, Faith. Good question. Generally speaking, those home devices don't give you the same level of confidence that the types of instrumentation and laboratory analyses that we use. So without knowing the exact device, it's hard to say. We do a fair amount of that for customers that will ask us about things if they give us a specific product. We'll take a look at it. So I'd encourage you, if you wanted to email it to us, it's pretty simple. You could just email WQ, which stands for water quality, at TVWD.org. We'd be happy to know what it is. But as a general rule of thumb, most things that consumers can buy off the shelf at that level just don't have the level of accuracy or consistency that we would consider a metric for deciding if water is safe or not. So, but again, please feel free to email it to us. Just send it to that email, WQ, which stands for water quality, at tvwd.org, and we'd happily take a look at the instrument and tell you what it can do or what it may be limited in doing. So.
Thanks, Joel. Next question is going to be for Kevin to answer. Customer writes in, storing enough water for 4 people for 2 weeks is a large amount. I struggle with finding affordable containers that aren't too heavy, that can be stored compactly and are easily maintained if I need to replace the water every 6 months. If you don't want to go into details here, what other resources do you have online?
That is a good question, and I will have to get back to you on different sources that you can and look for containers. I think that as I was looking at some of this for myself, I just shopped via Amazon and was able to find the containers that I use. So I will get back with you.
Thanks, Kevin. And a follow-up for Andrea on the communication question during an emergency. Customer writes, thanks all on the communication question. My primary concern is if we, the customers, don't have power for an extended period, news media reaching us is a challenge. It sounds like either the app and or updating info on the portal is the way to go. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Andrea?
No, I think that, when you start thinking these things through, Faith, you find pretty quickly that it is a pretty complex task to truly become ready. We do encourage you to reach out to some of your neighborhood partners if you live in a community that has CERT or a readiness team. This is where those emergency crank radios, things like that are probably worth throwing into your emergency kit. What we just try to emphasize to customers is just get started. And we say to start with water first because you can't survive very long without clean, drinking water. Then go to food, then go to shelter. And that's what our monthly newsletter does. It breaks that down for you in simple steps. I admittedly was terribly prepared when I started working at TVWD 5 years ago. And we just approached it at home as we've got to get started. And we're going to set aside, $20 a month. And we're just going to, if we want a bigger item like a water filter, then we have to save up a few months, but we're going to be very consistent about rotating these supplies out. And what happens is as you pass something like communications the third or fourth time, then you get more sophisticated, right? You say, well, who's my ham radio operator in my neighborhood? You find little groups of ways that you would be networked in your neighborhood. Somebody there probably has a generator. Maybe your HOA, working through what's the closest facility, like a fire station. And we're just going to have to help each other in a large scale emergency. No one's probably going to have the perfect kit. But if you just start thinking through these things one at a time and take baby steps, then you'll be a lot more prepared than if we just get ourselves overwhelmed, which is what I was doing. I kind of want to have everything all, can't there be just a place I can just buy everything? But as the other customer mentioned, these items can become expensive. There's other ways to treat drinking water with bleach or to convert other kinds of water into safe water. Maybe work with a neighbor who has more storage, divide it up. I know some of our HOAs in the TVWD service area are making neighborhood stores, a shed or something like that, where the neighbors would be able to help each other. And that's what you're going to hear from emergency messaging. You're going to hear, check on your neighbors, make sure other people who are vulnerable or housebound hear from somebody, because these will be some of the challenges we will face. And, watch what's happening in Puerto Rico. There are disasters appear. I try not to get overwhelmed. Don't watch it all day, but just check in and think through what would I do, because this think time is really important in actually responding.
Thanks, Andrea. And I think we're going to have one more here for Kevin. Customer Jan writes in, where in the home is the best place to store your supplies?
I think that answer to that is as varied as there are different houses. I use my garage because I have room in the garage to do it. I know some people that have an outbuilding, a shed. That's less than optimal because of the weather conditions. There are other people that get bottled water and store water, and they don't have a lot of storage area in their home, and they actually pulled the couch out a little bit from the wall and store some supplies behind there, and then they cover that covered it up with a blanket. So I think that you just need to look at the space that you have available, and the kind of container that you have. Think about potentially putting it underneath beds, or in closets and areas like that. So I think that's the best advice that I can give without knowing the actual structure.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. And as of right now, that finishes up our Q&A chat. So I'll offer one more last call for questions. And if we don't see any in the next couple seconds, then Dave, I will turn it back over to you and we will wrap up for the day.
Yeah, using our usual rule of an 8-second count for this online forums, looks like we're in the clear in terms of any questions or comments. So thank you everyone for your attendance, your time, and the questions, the interaction. It's really helpful for us in making sure that we're reaching out to the customers and communicating the information that you need, and appreciate your time. So thank you everybody, stay safe and have a good day. Thank you.